Okay, good day, everybody, and welcome to this May 8th Tech Talk. It's called Getting Started with InfoSphere Guardium Vulnerability Assessment. And this is actually a very timely talk. I think over this series of Tech Talks, we've ignored our vulnerability assessment offering. So now is the time to remedy that situation. And with the new vulnerability assessment eval edition and everything out on DeveloperWorks, it seems like a good chance to sort of to get a good overview of it and some demo. And so I'm really happy to have today Ian Schmidt, who is the new product manager for InfoSphere Guardium Vulnerability Assessment, and Louis Lamb, who is the development manager and who's been with Guardium for many, many years. And so between the two of them, you should be able to get most of your questions answered. And so I'm really glad that you all could join today. Continuing in the theme of vulnerability assessment, this is sort of an introduction to vulnerability assessment. Our next talk is going to take a deeper dive and sort of exploring the power that you can actually do with the product. There's a lot you can do. And Ian and Louis will both be on, and we'll also have a special guest speaker, Mike Martin, from our business partner, BTRG. And they've actually created a PeopleSoft vulnerability assessment offering service that is using some of the flexibility, the ability to create custom tests. We'll be having that on June 5th. And trying to drum up some support here for these regional user groups. We've had several already. The next one's in Boston on May 20th. So anybody in the area, I highly recommend, especially the ones in Boston, you're going to get an opportunity to be very close to the development organization and a good chance to speak with the product management and development leaders there. After that, there's one in Chicago. I will be at the one in Chicago along with my product manager friend from the Z side and one of our excellent Center of Excellence people. Really beautiful location, downtown Chicago. I hope you all can join us. And please see other locations there on the screen. There's links to all these registrations on the DeveloperWorks community.
Thank you, Kathy, and welcome. And we're going to talk about Guardium Vulnerability Assessment, kind of more or less kind of at an introductory level. We're going to start by talking a little bit about the vulnerability trends and the impact it's having on our industry, kind of give it some context here, and then we're going to drop into a quick discussion about InfoSphere Guardium Vulnerability Assessment, what it is and how it works, and then we're going to go down a little deeper and look at some details on and demonstrate some of the capabilities, and so you can get a better understanding of specifically what kinds of things you'll learn from it. And then lastly, I want to talk about InfoSphere Guardium Vulnerability Assessment Evaluation Edition, which is the new offering that Kathy referred to, and then at the end we're going to have some question and answer. One of the things I really kind of enjoy being in this area is looking at some of the work that comes out of IBM X-Force. And X-Force, you may or may not know, is a research organization within IBM that look at security in a very broad way, not just database, but security across the board. And they keep they do a number of things, but they publish a number of their research on attack types and the time and the impact. And this particular research study started in 2011 and really came into focus in 2011, where we saw that year was the year that at the time that they declared was the year of the targeted attack. And what X-Force did or started to do at that time is they started taking all these attacks that they'd learned about and kind of put them on this timeline and organized them in a number of different ways. They looked at the different attack types. So if you look at the color of these bubbles, it shows the specific attack types. And a very important one for us, for instance, is SQL injection attack types, which is you can see in the gold here. And then they tried to estimate what the kind of the financial or impact of the attack was on the industry. So they organized it by industry, by time, and type of attack. And so it was, it was a kind of the first foray into this, and you really started to see a very serious amount of breaches taking place. But in 2012, this same report started to look like this. And so you had a significant increase in volume and types of attacks and across a lot of different industries, and the impact that they were having on particular organizations that were breached get to be higher and higher. And when you look at the 2012 version of this, it's kind of shocking. To me, if data is the new oil, then this is starting to look to me like the Exxon Valdez or something. I mean, almost even this graphic looks a little bit like an oil slick. And in 2012, there were about 500 million records of personally identifiable information leaked. 500 million. So that's 1.5 for every person in the United States. And a lot of these coming out of the U.S. Not all of them, obviously, but it is getting to be a very, very serious issue, and something that's top of mind across, as we're probably all aware. Another very interesting kind of study comes out of Verizon, out of the business risk team, and they look at something a little different there, and they have some very broad-reaching reports, and they're more currently, they're organized by vertical industry. But the thing that you see is when they start looking at what are the primary sources for all this breached data, you see that, in their report from 2012, that a large number of this data, the source of the actual data, as opposed to what kind of breach it was the database. And so, in a sense, the database system itself is actually becoming kind of the last line of defense for security and protection against some of these kind of breaches. And if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense that the kinds of information that these hackers are looking for are financial records and customer information and credit card information, and that kind of stuff is typically organized and put away in databases. And so databases have our most valuable information. It's highly structured and it's very easy to access. So someone getting access to these database tables with this information basically have the keys to the kingdom. As Kathy said before, I'm relatively, I've just started in this area. I'm not new to database by any stretch of imagination. I've been in the industry for 35 years. But as far as the database vulnerability, this is something that I'm very excited about, and I started asking people, well, why are in customers that we have, why are databases vulnerable? Why are we having these issues? And people they come up with different, they have different opinions about this, and there are lots of different reasons. But one of the reasons that I hear is that, data of all forms, big data, mobile, cloud, it's basically exploding at an exponential level, and the resources to management are basically, they're limited. They're static, or in some cases they're getting smaller. So we're getting more data, but we have less capability to manage them, or less resources to manage them. Another thing that I hear quite often is that, all, development systems, or all these, developers working on new application systems are always up against, a deadline. And their primary focus are things like, are trying to get an application ready for a particular time. And often of these systems, they come right up to they need to be go live, and they've been tested. And the last thing they want to do is a lot of changes to the database, because they have to go back. And so quite often you see development systems, test systems get replicated into production without proper kind of lockdown procedures for the database. And this is also very true in application packages where they're big, they're complex, they have people, a lot of consultants involved, and there's not often a good understanding of the security implications of a lot of the default settings that are set around databases. And just generally, systems are turned over to DBAs with don't really have the kind of control that they would like to have on how the databases are set up. And so this is not necessarily a technological problem. It's a people and a process problem. But I think that there are no easy answers that solve all these problems. But there are some technologies that can help people address them and help them in trying to get control of these things. So what if we had some way an automated way of taking all the tests that we know about, all of the vulnerabilities that are generally understood in the industry, and you could run a report, an automated test against all the different kind of databases that you have in your environment, and those tests were kept up to date and refreshed constantly. And you had the ability to just run these tests against a particular database instance, and it would run in minutes. And it wasn't really complex to set up or a very intrusive kind of installation. And we had the ability to take the results of that test and actually provide you with kind of a prioritized report of where you stand with each database instance that you have in your environment. And you had, with that report, you had a graphical representation of all the improvements that you've made to improve the hardening of the database and locking it down better. And you could actually see over time what had actually changed. So you had some way of comparing things over time. And you could have, for each problem that you discovered, you had a recommendation on specifically what you have to do to fix that problem. So what, very actionable kind of information. And you had, a comprehensive view of the entitlements, what people have, who has access to what, which is a common problem that it's not only do we not know what we have, but we don't know who has access to what. And it's a very hard problem to solve. And you had all these capabilities, but you had links to a compliance workflow and a way of, in a database activity monitoring system to help you track changes and help you enforce changes that you make in your environment. So if you had all those things, then you basically have Guardium vulnerability assessment. That's basically what it is. When you have the product, you have the ability to do database discovery, which is there's often the case that people don't know what databases they have. In fact, it's a serious issue, actually just knowing where your databases exist, and then what is in those databases. What of these databases that we know about, what sensitive data exists there? So we have a sensitive data finder that crawls through the databases, and it provides database vulnerability scanning. So it will, run through all the databases that you point your problems at and your tests at, and give you that information. And the reporting, organizes the results and provides actionable recommendations. And it provides entitlement management and tells you who has access to what. And it also, and this is one thing that is not commonly understood, is that there are an awful lot of vulnerabilities that exist outside the database that have to do with files that surround the database. So we have a configuration audit system that monitors changes at the operating system level and help you, that expose your database to attack. So this is basically what Guardium vulnerability assessment is. And when we talk about vulnerabilities, we talk about it in a very broad way, but in a sense that there are four kind of categories, at least at the level we're going to talk about today. There are four categories. There's basically privileges, so checking for object creation and usage rights and privilege grants and things like that. And so getting that under control is a very important thing to address. And then authentication, making sure that the people that are who they say they are, and having the right password policies and locking down default vendor accounts, and no empty passwords, those kind of things. Those authentication kind of tests are another very large category. And then there's a whole set of things that will have to do with configurations. So checking platform-specific variables such as maximum fail logins for DBA profiles. And Also, another area, and this is just in the most recent X-Force report that I read, was that that vendors are improving very significantly in their ability and their responsiveness in the way they're developing patches. So, but customers or users have yet to kind of get to the point where they have the kind of patch level management that they need. And the thing that we check within the VA system is versioning and making sure that you have for the version numbers, the appropriate patch levels. So those are these are the main things. And you may ask, well, where does all this information come from? And Lewis, who's on, he's really the head of research for our group, and his organization does an excellent job of gathering and aggregating information from a lot of different places and putting it into, making these tests available to our customers. But you'll hear three different acronyms around kind of the security industry best practices. One is CIS, which is the Center for Internet Security. And they have a group within that they call the benchmarking group. And that the Center for Internet Security benchmarks are a big part of, are a big source of information for us. And another one you'll hear is STIG, which is the Security Technical Implementation Guide, or which always is generally organized by kind of database, and it provides these checklists that we often are used and incorporated into our tests. And the third one that not shown here is CVE, which is the common vulnerability and exposure dictionary, if you will. It basically provides you with a dictionary of identifiers. It's maintained by MITRE, and it's used broadly, and it helps for particularly when you're trying to aggregate information across a lot of different things, having CVE identifiers. So CVE testing is a big part of what we provide. And then we also get information on security vulnerabilities from other places, our own APARs, and other things that Lewis's group does research on. And Lewis and his group also actually contribute to some of these tests, so we're members of some things like CIS, and actually we're in some cases we're the sources of this information. If you look at the vulnerability product, it comes in two flavors, and just quickly just make reference to this. So there's a standard edition and advanced edition. A standard edition as your basic vulnerability assessment with the reporting and the remediation steps and the data protection system that is a subscription. And then there's the advanced edition, which adds configuration, audit system, entitlement reporting, which are things we'll be talking about in the next one of these tech talks. Whether you're all Guardium products, whether it's vulnerability assessment or or data activity monitoring, have base features of which are all enabled for the product, no matter which whether you have standard or advanced. And very important to this is the discovery and classification, which tends to be one of the steps involved in setting up vulnerability assessment. And so, those are just the capabilities of the product. If you look at a VA test report, so most of these test reports, they have a similar anatomy, so you get used to looking at them and you very quickly get the information that you need. At the top of all these tests is a summary of your results, and at the bottom you have a list of very detailed test results. And then this could be one thing, this could be this could be 500 things. It depends on what you're trying to test and how you've set it up. But what you'll see is that you always see an overall score, you'll see a detailed scoring matrix, and you will see filter controls here, as well as training information and results of how things have progressed over time. So you have a baseline and see the trends, whether you're regressing or progressing. very first thing I want to do is I found when I looked, there were 1,700 tests that we run, and sometimes a lot of this stuff gets to be very abstract. And so what I wanted to do is kind of maybe drill down on and give you a better understanding of what exactly what kinds of things you get to look at. So one big category is privilege management. And so, we try to test for excessive privileging. And I don't even think that's a real word, but I think you know what I mean, which is it's basically going through it and looking at all the entitlement or the privileges that we provide people into particular accounts and seeing which of these make sense. And one really bad thing or bad practice you see in multiple kinds of database is this practice of granting privileges to public, which basically says, you'll give system level privileges or audit behavior privileges or just access to user data to public, which means basically everybody has this capability or all the users have this capability. And what we will do is we go through, look at objects and usage rights associated with those objects and the ability that people have to grant privileges to other users, as well as what users have system-level rights and that may not need system-level rights, and the ability to be able to grant rights to others. And so kind of in this world of privilege management, public enemy number one is public. And so we've actually seen situations where some database servers have as many as 4,000 grants on system privileges that were granted to public. So it's a problem area. And so I would like to kind of look at some of these reports and have a look at the kind of things that we'll see. And so here's an example of a test that we ran against Oracle 11.2 that we have in our proof of technology suite of databases. And you'll see here, first thing you'll see, or first thing I tend to look at is how many tests am I looking at here. And you'll see here at the bottom here we have 446 tests, which is way too many tests to actually really have a good sense of what it is. But in a sense, if you're just trying to get a broad brush of understanding, you can run all the tests available for a certain type of database, and that's kind of what we did here. And of that, all those 446, 36% of the tests passed. Now, this is actually not that atypical when you take the VA product and you apply it to databases in the real world. It's not that, 30 to 40% is not, and it's not an indication that somebody's doing a bad job or whatever. It's just that it is without a conscious effort to actually, address some of these issues. It's not uncommon to see numbers like this or even lower. In fact, we'll probably see some things much lower than that when we talk about next session in June. But of the 36 or of this 446, there were 79, 36 of the 79 passed. There were 79 CIS tests, 35 state tests, of which 15 passed, and 20 CV tests, of which 0 passed. So, in a sense, you can see that this is kind of the composition of this. I find this particular graph to be extremely useful, and it is broken down by severity. The columns are organized by severity. So you have critical, major, minor, cautionary, and informational. And then it's broken down by type of test. So we have in the privilege area, we have 13 passes and 17 failures in the critical area for privileging. And then for major tests, we have 5 passes and 7 failures. And you can see that, well, first of all, it's way too much information, but it kind of gives you the broad brush. And what you would typically do is, if you had something as large as this, is you would filter it, and you would, let's say, take the critical and maybe those that fail, and you would run it against this. So you get a filtered down, smaller set of more digestible set of tests that you can do something with. And so we want to look a little bit at, drill down on some of the privileging kinds of tests and what you will learn. And so when you scan down and you look at privilege at the details, so we were up here and I'm scanning down and looking at the details, you see, the first thing you see when you look at a detailed non-test is you see what kind of category it is. And so this is a privilege test. Severity is critical because that's the filter I put on it. And this particular one is no access to catalog tables. So that's that privilege. And so a second one here is the authorization to alter privilege. So the ability to actually go in and change things kind of at the system level. It's not something that you would want an end user to be able to do. Or an important one here is the ability to go in and change the audit system. So this particular privilege allows someone to actually turn off audits and change, unauthorized alteration of system audit activities. So someone can turn off auditing, make some changes, and then turn it back on again. And so, that seems like a pretty bad thing, so we want to kind of fix that. So when you click on that, when you drill down on a particular, say, privilege, you get this information, and this is really, again, very, very helpful kind of stuff. You're going to get, tells you what the data source type is, and it gives you a pretty good description of what this is and what the external reference is. So when we're talking about CIS and CVE and STIG, it gives you the information that you would need to actually go in. Let's say this information wasn't deep enough. Maybe you want to go a little deeper. You can actually, cut and paste this into Google and hit the, do a search, and it'll take you right to the CIS documentation, and it'll give you even more information about this. A really helpful feature around this is the recommendations. So for this particular problem, it says, well, all you have to do is use the revoke audit system from and whatever the grantee is. And another very important piece of information is that it gives you a list of all the people that have this privilege. So you can go in and say, revoke audit system from Benji, Bill, Harry, Joe, Joey D, and Tom, and it would remove that privilege from these people. Now, this may be valid, it may not be valid, and you would have to find that out. But and if you wanted to take all these people and say, oh well, these guys are all part of the audit group, for instance, or whatever, you can add all these people to a list of members of a group, so that you can, and this grouping is used for queries and that kind of thing. So that's the kind of thing that you can do. What I did was I actually took this advice. I took the recommendation. I went into SQL Plus and did revoke audit from these things, and then I reran the test, and I reran the test, and it looked like this. And you see that, okay, so I made one change, made a couple changes here, and now we have, if I go into and make my filter, if I made my filter pass, you'll probably see this particular thing, I hope. We will go down and we'll see all the things that passed, and we look down here, and okay, no authorization audit system privilege passed. So I executed that command that was recommended, and now it looks like this. So that's a good thing. Another thing that you can do is you can compare your results. So this is the last run that I have, and I go back and I compare it to the first one that I looked at, and you see that you can see all the things that have changed, so line by line, and they're highlighted. So anything that's changed from run to run is highlighted in blue. So you can see this audit system, this is where I passed, and this is where I failed. So again, this kind of compare utility, very, very handy when you're dealing with a large amount of data and a lot of tests. Another thing that you can do, let's say, for instance, you had another option that you might have wanted to run an exception. Wanted to create an exception for this kind of thing. So let's go back and you wanted to look at failure here. If I wanted to go one of these privilege tests and say, well, this is something that I know I'm failing, but there's a good reason for it, and I don't really want to have this flagged, you can add a test exception, and it typically, you grant it for a particular time frame. So I could set an exception, end date, and time, explain what it is, and all these exceptions. It's not something that can, basically they're logged and they're very clear that you've created an exception on something. But there are some situations where you might want to or have to do that. So that's another kind of feature of the product. So I'm going to go back into my presentation mode again, and we'll talk about a few more things. And so I always like whenever I'm showing off something about a product and doing a demonstration of any kind, I always like to start with the end. So we started with the report, but the question might be, well, how do I get to a report? How do I alter reports? And what, and so when you set up these reports, you go into a configuration mode, and this is basically setting up a report. And so first thing you see is that all the different report types. So you choose a report type that you particularly interested in. And then you choose the type of test. So it could be predefined. It could be a CVE test or any PAR or all the different tests. And then based on those choices, it gives you a list of all the available tests for that kind of database, that kind of test, and those types. And then it puts those tests up here, and then you can actually do fine-tuning. So you can change some of the parameters of these tests so that they actually maybe fit your environment better. And so the next area I wanted to look at which is another kind of major area, is authentication management. So its ability to look at the existence of vendor default accounts or password policies. And I think one of the things that we don't recognize about the setting up of these databases is that whether we do it explicitly or it's implicit, a lot of the parameters and a lot of the setup of these databases actually establishes a policy for the management or how data is handled in your environment. So, and there could be behavioral vulnerabilities, and those kinds of things are all kind of part of authentication management. And one of the things I just, I picked this up just recently, and I just thought it was very interesting and scary too, that, if you look at from year to year, they come out with a list of what the top passwords are. And it's scary to kind of look at this list because they're so, easily guessed. And, the one I particularly like is password, which used to be number one, but I guess we lost one place last year. And so I think that, given that these are very common passwords, it's not surprising in some cases to see that people are not in all cases taking their responsibilities as serious as they should around passwords. And so, you want to be able to look for those kind of capabilities. So we have a whole bunch of what I call authentication tests, and I just wanted to give you a flavor of what those look like now. So if we choose Assess and Harden, which is a category that we generally associate with vulnerability assessment, you see this graphic. And what you really want to do is you want to go into this vulnerability assessment builder, which is what we're going to do. And we're going to go to Tech Talk on authentication, and we're going to go to the configuration test. And we're to hit Oracle here for the kind of test that we want to do. And then we're going to hit predefined. And so this will give you, by choosing Oracle and predefined, will give you a list of tests. And so what I wanted to do was look at things related to passwords. And so there are two kind of categories you'll see. You'll see authentication, and you will see a number of tests related to configuration. So some of these tests are a little bit of both. And then we'll add that as a selection, and it'll give us a set of these kind of password-oriented things. And so if you look here, you see one that I think everybody can relate to is failed login attempts. And when we do tests on, there are certain defaults that, and so DBA profile is how you address this, and you can change the default profile for your system, and it will change this profile parameter. And so what we will do here, let's say in my company that we have company with fat fingers, and our policy is that we want people to be able to sign in 5 times, and so instead of 3. And so I can change this parameter to 5. I can make it 2. I can make it 1. I can make it whatever. And so what the system will do when it does its testing is it's going to go through, and when it looks at this particular database, it's going to look for this profile, and it's going to look to see what the setting is. And the setting is 5. And it's looking for 3, then it's going to fail. And so what I had done is I'd had it set at 3. I changed it to 5. Now I've changed this parameter back up to 5 because that's what my setting is. And so it just kind of gives you a sense for how you tailor these reports. So, it's not the case that you would necessarily take all the tests for a particular database type, like Oracle or DB2 or something like that, and run them. You may have very specific things that you want to do at certain periods of the year or against specific servers. So you would typically pick some subset, and there would be some crafting on your part to, as a user, to identify and tailor these tests for your environment. And so you may have a small set of tests that are run across 10,000 servers. We have customers that have that many, we run VA against 10,000 different kind of servers in their environment, but they only do it at particular times, and so and they're very selective. We feel that there's a broad set of people up there that should have interest and do have interest in vulnerability assessment. And what we did was we put together an offering, and it's been available for a few weeks now, and it's a free download that we put on DeveloperWorks, and it's a VM image of vulnerability assessment. But what we did was we wanted to make it very, very basic and give people a sense for, okay, I've got some databases in my environment. I just want to run a few of these reports. And so it is a very simplified interface and has a limited set of basic functions. And so it doesn't have all the depth of it, for instance, the ability to kind of configure these reports. So if you choose a particular kind of database like Oracle or SQL Server or whatever, Teradata or DB2, it will run all the tests for that. But then you can use the filtering to drill down. It typically would be installed on premise, so it's not a cloud kind of thing. You connect it to your databases, you run your basic reports, and it has 3 features. One to do discovery against Amazon databases, which I found not that common, but 2 very common functions that it has is sensitive data discovery and vulnerability assessment. And the way it would, if you saw my previous slide on the full system with all the tabs, and it takes a while to be very facile with the use of something that is has this many features. But so what we wanted to do was create something very simple. So the interface to this is basically you have tab on the left-hand side. You choose an activity, so you choose, say, access to database vulnerabilities. You hit the new button. You create a test. You name the test. You give it a category. You define the data source, what the database looks like, and then you basically run it. And the result that you get is what you just saw, which is a test that kind of compares your database and meets all those different criteria. A common question that I get is, well, what's the difference between the evaluation version and the standard version? And certainly so there's a number of differences. One is that it's a fixed length of time. So after 30 days, the system is, basically there's a time bomb. Whereas in standard version, it's a perpetual license. You have access to 10 data sources on the evaluation system as opposed to unlimited. In the evaluation version, you get your subscription you can't change, you can't add new subscriptions. It's fixed. The recommendations are not included, nor is the links to external information included. It doesn't. We have the ability to export the failures to a security incident event manager, CM. That would not be there. It doesn't have any kind of the customization we just saw in the configuration page, and it doesn't. It only does discovery of Amazon databases as opposed to the full product, which can discover anything. So it is. It has some of these limitations, but on the positive side, once you point it at a particular database, it's going to take you through all the tests for that database. I think I've had exposure to. We've had it for a few weeks in the field, kind of, and we found, generally I find that people, once they get the thing set up and they start running with it, they're not finding that much. It's pretty straightforward. If people are going to have issues and kind of in gotchas, if you will, it's in the setup side. So, and it's because there's, if you're using a VM image, you have to basically configure that VM image, and a lot of people just don't have those. That they're not very knowledgeable about that technology. At least some people aren't. And if you're not, I think you'll typically need some help from somebody who is. But the things that you'll have to do is first of all, you're going to have to run for the databases that you want to assess. You're going to have to run some scripts to get the appropriate credentials set up, and then a lot of systems, they all have README files, and you don't look at them. You're going to have to look at the README file for this. The steps are the image comes as what they call open virtual format file, and so it's OFA is the suffix for the file. So and a lot of there are a number of VMware players out there, or VM players. So VMware being one. Oracle VirtualBox is one that I use. I like it a lot. It works well with this. In what I was using today, by the way, and the configure, you have to basically configure that VM player, getting the appropriate size, and make sure you choose the right operating system type. So this will be Red Hat Linux 64. You got to choose the right network type, which is NAS. And if you're familiar with this, there's a lot of different there are 4 choices, and this has to be NAS. You have to do your network settings appropriately, and then once you get it up and you're running, you have to configure the actual appliance itself so that it's set up properly for the IP that you're using as your host and your network. And then a couple of customers have said, well, there's some reference here to NTP, and NTP is strictly something that's used to keep your machine in sync with Amazon. If you're not using Amazon Discovery, don't worry about it. It's an optional thing. And so, those are things that people have brought up to me. Another thing I actually, once they get the thing configured, it's very simple, but then they say, okay, I got it working, now what? And there are two answers to that. There's a zip file that has some step-by-step instructions for one for vulnerability assessment and one for the classifier, and or if you're in the system, if you just go to the menu bar, you hit this icon here. It pops up all the documentation that you need, and this isn't the only place the documentation exists inside that. So there's documentation inside the system. There's documentation outside the system, and you'll need to follow those steps. A couple of people looked at it and they said, okay, I followed the step and I've done exactly what it says. I can't seem to get at the database, and so I guess it was not obvious to, when we wrote it, that people will get the idea that there's a demo database in there. There is no demo database. You really have to point this at a real database that you have in your environment for it to work. There's some very good demo videos on YouTube related to this evaluation that Kathy put together, and it's probably much better demos than you just got from me. Kathy does a much better job. And so here see the demo video, and here's the URL for it, and we'll have also the URLs at the end here. And so those are most of the things that I wanted to talk about today. Things that we didn't talk about, there's a lot of depth in this product. There's an awful lot of capability. And I just what I tried to do is kind of expose you to the basics. But you can build your own tests, and we're going to talk a lot more about that. This is very unique to this product. I've not seen any other product that has this kind of capability to be able to customize. I've also, you can export, integrate with other kind of systems. There's the CAS system for configuration, looking at the files at the operating system, scheduling, and entitlement reporting. And so these are other features that I didn't touch on, but are parts of VA. At this point, I think I'm going to open it up to questions, and I'm going to try to pass this back to you, Kathy, and so you can follow up.
I think Mark had a good question about, do we need to load, for VA, do we need to load any software on the database platforms?
No. But what you do have to do, as I said before, is you have to run the, give the system, you have to run a script that gives the appropriate credentials to the VA system so we can actually run the test. So there's no, with our other product, the DAM product, we have agents on the actual database for lots of good reasons. But for this product, you don't really need it.
So those of you who are familiar with DAM, this is very different. There's no agent. I mean, if you're running CAS, that's another story. But in general, for the VA, there's no agent.
Yeah.
Right, and there's CAS is not included in the eval as well.
Right. So how often do users, our customers usually run these tests? Is it weekly, monthly, yearly? Is there?
Ideally, run them. It really depends. How active and how things you change. There's really no magic formula of date, but at least once a week is ideal. So you can sort of, even though you may not be making changes on your system as far as remediation, but at least it gives you an idea by just looking at the score. Anything changes, did somebody change configuration, or maybe new employee comes in, you see all kinds of privilege granted, and then is this a good thing or not? So it gives you an idea to compare, just like looking at a baseline from what you had previously. But, as far as how often you run it, you can run this as often as you like. You can run it multiple times a day, daily, right? But I believe the typical user typically do this once every week, and the execution on these assessments are very quick. It takes like a couple minutes per databases. So really, there's no performance and there's no penalty for you to do it on more frequently if you choose to.
And I want to thank everybody for coming, and I want to thank Ian for doing a great job. And we'll see you all next month. Have a good day.
Thank you, Kathy. I appreciate the opportunity. And